I always thought insomnia was my worst enemy. Turns out, it was my best friend. 3:15 in the morning, and I was wandering around our house like a ghost in flannel pajamas. Grant Solen, insurance investigator by day, insomniac by night, husband to a woman who could sleep through a tornado. At least, that's what I thought. The wedding was in 2 days. Our daughter Nora's big day, marrying Cole Merrick, the golden boy contractor who'd swept her off her feet with his perfect smile and his father's money. The house had been chaos for weeks. Caterers calling, florists delivering, relatives flying in from 3 states. Mira, my wife of 22 years, had orchestrated it all with the precision of a military campaign. I padded down the hallway, past the guest rooms filled with out-of-town family, past the dining room table buried under wedding favors and seating charts. The kitchen was dark, moonlight streaming through the bay windows that looked out onto our garden. Mira's pride and joy, that garden. She'd spent 15 years cultivating it, turning our backyard into something that belonged in a magazine. That's when I noticed the light. A soft yellow glow coming from the garden shed. The workshop I'd built 3 summers ago, where Mira stored her gardening tools and I kept my woodworking equipment. The light was dim, probably just the old desk lamp I kept on the workbench, but something about it felt wrong. Like a note played off-key in an otherwise perfect symphony. I pulled on my boots and went outside. The October air was sharp, filled with the scent of fallen leaves and Mira's prize-winning roses. Dew clung to the grass, seeping into my pajama bottoms as I crossed the yard. Each step felt heavier than the last, even though I couldn't explain why. The shed door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see shadows moving against the wall. 2 figures, close together, their movements unmistakable even in silhouette. My hand froze on the door handle. Part of me wanted to turn around, go back to bed, pretend I'd never seen anything. But 23 years as an insurance investigator had taught me that the truth doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It festers. It grows. It eventually explodes in your face when you least expect it. I pushed the door open. Mira was pressed against my workbench, her silk nightgown hiked up around her waist. Behind her, his hands gripping her hips with familiar intimacy, was Cole Merrick, my daughter's fiancé. The man who was supposed to marry Nora in 48 hours. They didn't notice me at first. They were too lost in their own world, too consumed by whatever this was between them. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, watching my life implode in slow motion. Mira's head was thrown back, her eyes closed, her mouth open in silent pleasure. Cole's face was buried in her neck, his wedding ring, the one that matched Nora's engagement ring, catching the lamplight. "Well," I said, my voice cutting through the night air like a blade. "This explains why you've been sleeping so well lately." They sprang apart like teenagers caught by their parents. Mira's face went white, her hands scrambling to pull down her nightgown. Cole stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a stack of flower pots, his face a mask of panic and guilt. "Grant," Mira breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "I can explain." "Can you?" I stepped into the shed, closing the door behind me. "Because I'm genuinely curious how you explain this to our daughter, or to your parents, who flew in from Chicago yesterday, or to the 200 people who'll be sitting in St. Mary's on Saturday, waiting to watch Cole pledge his eternal love to Nora." Cole opened his mouth, probably to stammer out some pathetic excuse, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. Because right now, I'm trying very hard to remember that I'm a civilized human being and not an animal who settles disputes with his fists." The shed felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in. The smell of potting soil and motor oil mixed with something else. The scent of betrayal, sharp and bitter in my nostrils. My hands were shaking, not with fear but with rage so pure it felt like electricity coursing through my veins. "How long?" I asked, looking directly at Mira. "How long has this been going on?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "Grant, please, you have to understand. How long?" 6 months, Cole blurted out, then immediately looked like he regretted speaking. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of Mira kissing me goodbye in the morning and coming home with stories about her book club, her yoga classes, her shopping trips with her sister Vera. Half a year of watching Cole sit at our dinner table, holding Nora's hand, talking about their future together while he was screwing her stepmother behind her back. I was about to say something, probably something that would have ended with Cole eating his own teeth, when the shed door opened again. Nora stepped inside. My daughter looked exactly like her mother had at 22, tall and willowy, with dark hair that caught the light and green eyes that seemed to see everything. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked completely, unnaturally calm. "Dad," she said quietly. "Don't." "Nora," Mira started, her voice breaking. "Sweetheart, this isn't what it looks like." "Yes, it is." Nora's voice was steady, controlled. She looked at Cole with something that might have been pity. "It's exactly what it looks like." Cole took a step toward her, his hand outstretched. "Nora, baby, please let me explain." "Don't call me baby." The words came out like ice chips. "Don't call me anything. Don't even look at me." I stared at my daughter, trying to process her reaction. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't falling apart the way any normal person would when they caught their fiancé cheating with their stepmother. She was just standing there, like she was watching a movie she'd already seen. "You already knew," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Nora nodded. "I've known for months." The shed went silent except for the sound of our breathing and the distant hum of the neighbor's air conditioning unit. I felt like I was falling through space, like everything I thought I knew about my family, my life, my reality had just been revealed as an elaborate lie. "Then why?" I started. "Because it's worse than you think, Dad." Nora reached into her pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. "Much worse. And you need to see everything before you do something you'll regret." She held out the drive, and I took it with numb fingers. It was warm from being in her pocket, a tiny piece of plastic that apparently contained the ruins of my marriage. "What's on here?" I asked. "Everything," Nora said. 24 years of everything. 24 years. That was longer than Cole had been alive. Longer than Nora had been alive. That was almost the entire length of my marriage to Mira. I looked at my wife, this woman I'd shared a bed with for over 2 decades, and realized I didn't know her at all. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face, but she still couldn't meet my eyes. "Go inside," I told Cole. "Pack your things and get out of my house. If you're still here in an hour, I'll call the police and tell them you're trespassing." "Grant, you can't," Mira started. "I can, and I will." I turned to face her fully. "You lost the right to tell me what I can and can't do the moment you brought him into our shed." Cole grabbed his shirt from where it had been thrown over a bag of mulch and stumbled toward the door. He paused when he reached Nora, opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then seemed to think better of it. Smart choice. After he was gone, the 3 of us stood in the shed like survivors of a natural disaster, surveying the wreckage. The silence stretched on until I couldn't stand it anymore. 24 years, I said to Mira. "What does that mean? What happened 24 years ago?" Nora answered before Mira could. "That's when she started sleeping with Holden Revell." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Holden Revell, Mira's old friend from college. The contractor who'd done work on our house when we first bought it. The man who'd been at Nora's christening, who'd sent Christmas cards every year, who'd been to dozens of dinner parties and barbecues at our house. The man who'd been at those events with his wife, Leora, while he was apparently having an affair with mine. "Holden," I repeated, tasting the name like poison. He's Nora's biological father, Mira whispered. And there it was, the final piece of the puzzle, the one that made all the other pieces fall into place. I looked at Nora, really looked at her, and saw it for the first time. The shape of her nose, the set of her jaw, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. Not my features, Holden's. The fertility treatments, I said, remembering those months of appointments and procedures 22 years ago. The donor program. There was no donor program, Nora said quietly. There were no fertility treatments. There was just Mom and Holden and a lot of lies. I sat down heavily on a stack of fertilizer bags, the flash drive clutched in my fist. My daughter, not my daughter apparently, but still the person I'd raised and loved for 22 years, was standing in front of me, telling me that my entire life had been built on a foundation of deception. How long have you known? I asked her. About Holden being my father? 6 months? About Mom and Cole? 3 months? I hired a private investigator after I started suspecting something was wrong. The DNA test was just the beginning. A private investigator. My 22-year-old daughter had hired a private investigator to uncover her own family's secrets. The irony wasn't lost on me. I made my living investigating other people's lies, but I'd been completely blind to the ones in my own home. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Because I needed to know everything first, and because I needed proof. You taught me that, remember? You always said that suspicion without evidence is just paranoia. She was right. I had taught her that. During all those years when she'd ask me about my work, when I'd explain how insurance fraud investigations worked, I'd always emphasize the importance of building an airtight case before making accusations. I never thought she'd use those lessons to investigate her own family. What else is on here? I asked, holding up the flash drive. Bank records, hotel receipts, phone records, text messages, emails going back years, photos, video surveillance from the motel on Route 9. Nora's voice was clinical, professional. Everything you need to understand exactly how long this has been going on and how much it's cost you. Cost me. Not just emotionally, but financially. I thought about our joint checking account, the savings account we'd built up over the years, the investment portfolio that was supposed to fund our retirement. How much? I asked. $380,000 over the past 19 years, Nora said, funneled through various accounts to Holden's contracting business, most of it after his company started failing. $380,000. Nearly $400,000 of my money used to prop up the business of the man who'd been sleeping with my wife and who'd fathered my daughter. I looked at Mira, who was now sitting on the floor of the shed, her back against the wall, her face buried in her hands. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, like a balloon with the air slowly leaking out. Why? I asked her. Why any of this? Why Cole? Why now? She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Holden's gone, Grant. He passed away 8 months ago. Heart attack. I was lost. Cole reminded me of him when he was young. So you decided to destroy our daughter's life because you were grieving your lover? It wasn't supposed to happen, Mira said, her voice barely audible. Cole was just... He was there, and he was kind, and he reminded me of better times. It was supposed to be just once, just to feel something again. But it wasn't just once. No, it wasn't. I stood up, my legs unsteady. The shed felt like it was spinning around me, the walls breathing in and out like lungs. I needed air. I needed space. I needed time to process what I'd just learned. I'm going inside, I said. We'll deal with this in the morning. Grant, wait, Mira called after me. Please, we need to talk about this. We need to figure out what we're going to do about the wedding, about the guests, about... There's nothing to figure out, I said without turning around. The wedding's off. The guests can go home. And you can start figuring out where you're going to live, because it won't be here. I walked back to the house with Nora beside me, leaving Mira alone in the shed with her tears and her regrets. The grass was still wet, the night air still crisp, but everything else had changed. The house that had been my sanctuary for 22 years now felt like a crime scene. Inside, Nora made coffee while I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the flash drive. Such a small thing to contain the destruction of a life. "Are you okay?" Nora asked, setting a mug in front of me. I almost laughed. Was I okay? I'd just discovered that my wife had been cheating on me for nearly our entire marriage, that my daughter wasn't biologically mine, that I'd been financially supporting my wife's affair for 2 decades, and that my future son-in-law had been sleeping with my wife. Okay didn't begin to cover it. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Are you?" "I've had 6 months to process this," she said, sitting down across from me. "I went through all the stages of grief already. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression. I'm somewhere between acceptance and planning my revenge." "Revenge? You didn't think I was just going to let them get away with this, did you?" Nora's smile was sharp, predatory. "I'm your daughter, Dad. Maybe not by genetics, but by training. You taught me how to investigate, how to build a case, how to be patient and methodical." She was right. I had taught her those things. And looking at her now, I realized she'd learned them better than I'd ever imagined. "What kind of revenge?" I asked. "The kind that ruins them completely. Publicly. Permanently." Nora leaned forward, her green eyes bright with determination. "Mom thinks she can have her cake and eat it too. She thinks she can keep living in this house, spending your money, playing the role of the grieving widow for Holden while starting fresh with Cole. She thinks the worst thing that can happen is a quiet divorce where she gets half of everything." "And Cole?" "Cole thinks he can talk his way out of this. He thinks he can convince me to forgive him, or at least to keep quiet about it. He thinks his reputation and his business will survive this intact." I took a sip of coffee, feeling the caffeine hit my system like a small electric shock. "What do you have in mind?" "First, we're going to let them think they're safe. Let them think you're going to handle this quietly, maybe even that you're going to try to work things out with Mom for the sake of the family. Let them get comfortable. And then? Then we're going to destroy them, piece by piece, starting with the rehearsal dinner tomorrow night." The rehearsal dinner. In all the chaos of the last hour, I'd forgotten about it. 50 people gathering at the country club to celebrate a wedding that was never going to happen. Mira's parents, my brother and his wife, Cole's family, our closest friends, all of them expecting a joyous evening of toasts and laughter. "What about the guests?" I asked. "What about your grandparents? They flew in from Chicago yesterday. They'll understand once they know the truth. And if they don't, then they're not the people I thought they were." Nora's voice was cold, matter of fact. "Everyone's going to know everything, Dad. Every detail, every lie, every dollar, every hotel room, every text message." I studied my daughter's face, looking for some sign of the sweet, trusting girl I'd raised. She was still there, underneath the anger and the hurt, but she'd been transformed by betrayal into something harder, more calculating. "This will destroy your mother," I said. "Good, she destroyed us first." We sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee and contemplating the ruins of our family. Outside, the sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was going to be a beautiful day. Perfect weather for a wedding that would never happen. "There's something else," Nora said eventually. "Something I haven't told you yet." "What?" "Holden's widow, Leora. She contacted me 3 weeks ago. Apparently Mom promised Holden she'd leave you after my wedding. She was planning to take half of everything in the divorce and start fresh with Cole." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The timing of the affair with Cole, the elaborate wedding planning, Mira's insistence on having the ceremony so soon after Nora's engagement. It had all been part of an exit strategy. "Leora has letters," Nora continued. Love letters from Mom to Holden, going back 20 years, including one from last year where Mom talks about her exit plan and how she can't wait to be free of her boring husband and his pathetic suburban life. Boring husband. Pathetic suburban life. 22 years of marriage, reduced to those 4 words. She's willing to testify in divorce court if necessary, Nora said. She's angry about the money Mom funneled to Holden's business. Apparently, Leora didn't know about any of it until after he passed away, and she started going through his finances. I finished my coffee and set the mug down with a sharp click. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the kitchen windows and illuminating the wedding favors scattered across the dining room table. Little white boxes tied with silver ribbons, each one containing a piece of chocolate shaped like a wedding bell. How fitting. All right, I said, standing up. Let's do this, but we do it right. We do it thoroughly, and we make sure they never recover from it. Nora smiled, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she looked like the daughter I remembered. I was hoping you'd say that. I spent the morning in my home office, a converted bedroom on the 2nd floor that overlooked the garden. From my desk, I could see the shed where my life had imploded 6 hours earlier. Mira had finally come inside around dawn, but she'd gone straight to the guest room. We hadn't spoken. The flash drive sat next to my computer like a small black tumor. I'd been staring at it for 20 minutes, working up the courage to plug it in. Once I saw what was on there would be no going back. No pretending this was all a misunderstanding or a momentary lapse in judgment. But I was an investigator. I'd built my career on uncovering uncomfortable truths. The only difference was that this time, the truth was about my own life. I plugged in the drive. The folder structure was meticulous, organized by year and then by category: bank records, phone logs, hotel receipts, email printouts, photographs, video files. Nora had been thorough, more thorough than some of the professional investigators I'd worked with over the years. I started with the bank records. The first transfer was dated March 15, 2005. $15,000 from our joint savings account to something called Revell Construction Consulting. The memo line read, "Home renovation deposit." I remembered that transaction. We'd hired Holden to redo our kitchen that spring. What I didn't remember was authorizing a $15,000 deposit for a job that had cost us $8,000 total. The pattern continued from there. Monthly transfers, sometimes small, sometimes large, always with plausible explanations. Home improvements, investment opportunities, emergency loans to help a friend in need. Over 19 years, it added up to exactly what Nora had said: $380,000. Nearly $400,000, enough to buy a house, enough to fund a comfortable retirement. Gone. I opened the email folder next. The messages went back to 2003, starting innocent enough, friendly exchanges between old college friends. But by 2004, the tone had changed. Intimate messages, plans to meet, declarations of love. One email from 2005 caught my attention. From mirasolenemail.com to hrravela@ravelconstruction.com. Subject: Our little secret H. Grant suspects nothing. He's so buried in his work that I could probably have you over for dinner and he wouldn't notice. Speaking of which, can you make it Thursday? He has that conference in Boston and won't be back until Friday night. I'll make your favorite. MPS. The money should be in your account by tomorrow. Grant thinks it's for the bathroom renovation. Little does he know we're renovating our future instead. I remembered that conference, a 3-day insurance fraud seminar in Boston. I'd been excited about it, looking forward to learning new investigation techniques. While I was sitting in hotel conference rooms, taking notes on how to catch cheaters, my wife was at home with her lover, spending my money to fund their affair. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. I kept reading. Email after email, year after year, a complete record of their relationship. The excitement of new love giving way to the comfortable intimacy of a long-term affair. Plans for weekend getaways while I was traveling for work. discussions about leaving their respective spouses, arguments about money, about the future, about the risks they were taking. And then, in 2019, a shift in tone. From hravela@ravelconstruction.com to Mira Solen email.com. Subject: The plan I can't keep doing this. Leora's getting suspicious, and my business is falling apart. I need more than just the monthly payments. I need a real investment, something substantial enough to save the company. If you're serious about us having a future together, now's the time to prove it. From mirasolenemail.com to hravela@ravelconstruction.com. Subject: The plan H. You know I'm serious. I've been serious for 15 years, but I can't just clean out our accounts without Grant noticing. Give me time to figure this out. Maybe after Nora graduates college, when things settle down. I promise you, we'll have our chance. From hravela@ravelconstruction.com to mirasolenemail.com. Subject: The plan. Time is something I don't have. The bank is threatening foreclosure. I'm going to lose everything if I don't get help soon. I love you, but I can't wait forever. Either we do this now, or we don't do it at all. The email stopped there, but I could fill in the blanks. Holden had given Mira an ultimatum: help him save his business or lose him forever. So she'd started taking larger amounts, being more creative with her explanations. A new roof for the house, investments in mutual funds, emergency repairs for her sister's car. All lies, all money going straight to Holden's failing business. I opened the folder labeled Photos next. Most of them were surveillance shots, Mira and Holden entering and leaving hotels, restaurants, his office. But some were more intimate. Photos of them together in hotel rooms, clearly taken by one of them for the other. I closed that folder quickly. I didn't need to see any more. The video files were worse. Security footage from the motel on Route 9, showing Mira and Holden checking in together dozens of times over the years. The timestamps covered weekdays when I was at work, weekends when I thought she was visiting her sister, evenings when she claimed to be at book club. Book club. She'd been going to book club every Thursday night for 6 years. I'd even asked her about the books sometimes, and she'd always had detailed opinions about whatever novel they were supposedly discussing. I wondered if there even was a book club, or if that was just another lie in the elaborate fiction that had been my marriage. My phone buzzed. A text from Nora. "How are you holding up?" I typed back. "Still processing. This is comprehensive. I know. I'm sorry you have to see all this. Don't apologize. You did the right thing. Where are you? Coffee shop downtown. Avoiding the house. Mom's been calling me every 10 minutes, I could imagine." Mira was probably panicking, trying to figure out how much damage control she could do. She was probably crafting her story right now, deciding which version of events would be most likely to generate sympathy and forgiveness. But she didn't know about the flash drive. She didn't know that Nora had documented everything. She was probably assuming she could rely on my desire to avoid scandal, my reluctance to air our dirty laundry in public. She was wrong. My computer chimed with an incoming email. The sender's address made my stomach clench. lventralegmail.com, Leora Ventral, Holden's widow. "Mr. Solen, I hope you don't mind me contacting you directly. Your daughter gave me your email address. I believe she's told you about our recent conversations. I want you to know how sorry I am about all of this. I had no idea about Holden's relationship with your wife until after he passed away. I've spent the last 8 months going through his papers, trying to understand how our finances got so tangled up, and the picture that emerged was disturbing. I have documents that might be helpful to you. Letters, financial records, even some recordings that Holden made for insurance purposes when his business was failing. I think you deserve to know the full scope of what was happening. Would you be willing to meet? I'm driving up from Connecticut this afternoon. I was planning to attend the rehearsal dinner tonight. Holden and I were invited months ago, before I knew about any of this. But given the circumstances, I thought it might be better if we spoke privately first. I'll be staying at the Hampton Inn on Route 9, room 247. I'll be there all afternoon if you'd like to talk. Sincerely, Leora Ventral P.S. Your daughter is remarkable. You should be very proud of her. I stared at the email for a long moment. Leora was coming to town. She had more evidence, and she'd been invited to the rehearsal dinner, which meant she knew about the wedding, knew that Mira had been planning to leave me right after Nora got married. The timing was perfect, too perfect to be coincidental. I called Nora. "Did you arrange for Leora to come up here?" I asked when she answered. "I might have mentioned that tonight would be an interesting evening," she said. "Why?" "Because she just emailed me. She wants to meet this afternoon." "Good. You need to hear what she has to say, and you need to see the recordings." "Recordings?" "Audio files. Holden recorded some of his phone conversations with Mom, apparently for insurance purposes when his business was failing. He wanted proof that she'd promised to help him financially in case she tried to back out later. More evidence. More proof of the deception that had defined my marriage. I was starting to feel like an archaeologist, uncovering layer after layer of lies buried beneath the surface of my life. "Nora," I said, "are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we start, there's no stopping. Everyone's going to know. Your grandparents, our friends, the whole town. Dad, they destroyed my family. They stole my father's money. They made a mockery of everything I believed about love and marriage and trust. Do you really think I'm going to let them walk away from this?" Her voice was steady, determined. She'd made her choice months ago, when she'd first discovered the truth. Everything since then had just been preparation. "All right," I said. "I'll meet with Leora this afternoon. What about Cole? Have you heard from him?" "He's been texting me all morning. Apologies, excuses, promises that it didn't mean anything. The usual cheater's playbook." "What are you telling him?" "Nothing. I'm letting him think there's still a chance. The more desperate he gets, the more mistakes he'll make." I hung up and went back to the flash drive. There was still more to see, more pieces of the puzzle to put together. But first, I needed coffee. And probably something stronger. I went downstairs to the kitchen, where the wedding favors were still scattered across the table like the remnants of a celebration that had ended before it began. Each little white box represented money spent, plans made, hopes for the future. All of it wasted now. Mira appeared in the doorway as I was starting the coffee maker. She looked terrible. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes were red and swollen, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd had on in the shed. She looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. "Grant," she said softly, "we need to talk." "Do we?" "Please, just let me explain." I turned to face her, leaning against the counter. "Explain what? Explain how you've been lying to me for 24 years? Explain how you stole nearly $400,000 from our accounts? Explain how you've been planning to leave me right after our daughter's wedding?" Her face went white. "How do you know about the money? Know about your exit plan? Know about Leora?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm an investigator, Mira. It's what I do. The only mystery is how I missed it for so long." She sat down heavily at the kitchen table, her shoulders sagging. "I never meant for it to go this far." "Which part? The affair? The theft? The elaborate wedding charade?" "Any of it. All of it." She looked up at me with desperate eyes. "It started as just comfort. After we'd been trying to have a baby for so long, and the doctors said it might not happen naturally, I was feeling so lost and broken. Holden was there, and he listened, and he made me feel like I wasn't defective. So you decided to have an affair. I decided to feel human again, just for one night. But then..." She trailed off, staring at her hands. "Then you got pregnant." Then I got pregnant, and suddenly everything was complicated. I couldn't tell you the truth because it would have destroyed you, and I couldn't tell Holden because he was married too, and it would have destroyed his family. So I made up the story about the fertility treatments, and I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. No, because Holden knew. He figured it out when Nora was born, and she looked just like him. And he wanted to be part of her life, even if he couldn't acknowledge her publicly. So we stayed in touch, just as friends at first. But then you fell in love with him. I never stopped loving you, she said, and for the first time, her voice broke. But yes, I loved him too. And the longer it went on, the harder it became to end it. Every year that passed made the lie bigger, made the truth more impossible to tell. The coffee maker beeped, and I poured myself a cup. I didn't offer one to Mira. She didn't deserve my hospitality anymore. And the money? I asked. Holden's business was struggling. He needed help, and I wanted to help him. I thought of it as investing in Nora's future. If her biological father succeeded, it would be good for her somehow. You thought stealing from me was good for our daughter? I thought I was borrowing from us. I always planned to pay it back. With what? Your book club earnings? She flinched. There was a book club, for the first 2 years. Then it ended, but I kept using it as an excuse because it was easier than explaining where I was really going. Which was? Hotels. His office. Sometimes his house when Leora was out of town. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I know how this sounds. I know what I've done to you, to us, to Nora. But I never meant for any of this to happen. But you did mean to leave me, I said. After the wedding, you were planning to file for divorce and take half of what was left. How do you know that? Because Leora told Nora. Because Holden kept records. Because you're not as smart as you think you are. I took a sip of coffee, studying her face. What I don't understand is Cole. Why him? Why now? Holden's only been gone 8 months. I was grieving, she said quietly. I know that sounds pathetic, but I was. I'd lost the love of my life, and I couldn't even mourn him publicly because no one knew about us. Cole was kind to me at the engagement party. He reminded me of Holden when he was young. And I was so lonely, Grant. So incredibly lonely. So you decided to seduce our daughter's fiancé. I didn't seduce him. It just happened. One conversation led to another, and before I knew it, we were meeting for coffee, then drinks, then... She gestured helplessly. Then you were screwing him in our garden shed. It was only supposed to be a few times, just until I felt human again. I never meant for Nora to find out. I never meant for you to find out. But we did find out, and now everything's ruined. It doesn't have to be, she said, leaning forward urgently. We can fix this, Grant. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. People survive affairs all the time. Affairs, maybe? But this wasn't an affair, Mira. This was a double life. This was 24 years of systematic deception. This was theft. This was fraud. This was... I paused, searching for the right words. This was the complete destruction of everything I thought I knew about my own life. But we can rebuild. No, I said firmly. We can't. Because I don't know who you are anymore. I don't know if I ever knew who you were. The woman I married, the woman I thought I'd been living with all these years, she doesn't exist. She was just a character you played. Mira was sobbing now, her whole body shaking with the force of her tears. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to hold her and tell her everything would be okay. 22 years of marriage doesn't just disappear overnight, even when it's built on lies, but a larger part of me felt nothing but cold anger. She'd stolen my life. She'd stolen my money. She'd stolen my daughter's innocence and trust. She'd made me complicit in my own deception, turning me into a fool who'd supported his wife's affair for 2 decades without even knowing it. What happens now? She asked through her tears. Now you pack your things and leave. Today, before the rehearsal dinner. Grant, please, you can stay with your sister Vera until you figure out something more permanent. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings. What about Nora's wedding? There is no wedding. Nora's not marrying Cole. She hasn't been planning to marry him for months, probably. This whole thing has been an elaborate setup. Mira's face went pale. A setup? She knows everything, Mira. She's known for months. The private investigator, the DNA test, the financial records, all of it was her idea. She's been building a case against you like a prosecutor preparing for trial. But why? Why would she do that to her own mother? Because you're not her mother, I said, the words coming out harsher than I'd intended. You're the woman who lied to her about her parentage for 22 years. You're the woman who stole money from the man who raised her. You're the woman who destroyed her family for your own selfish reasons. I am her mother, Mira said fiercely. I carried her for 9 months. I gave birth to her. I raised her. I love her more than anything in this world. Then you should have thought about that before you decided to screw her fiancé. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of Mira's crying and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking and the sound of traffic on the main road. Normal sounds of a normal day in a normal neighborhood. But nothing about this day was normal. Nothing about my life was normal anymore. I should go pack, Mira said eventually, standing up on unsteady legs. Yes, you should. She paused at the kitchen doorway, looking back at me with desperate eyes. Grant, I want you to know that I did love you. I do love you. Whatever else was true, that was always true. No, I said quietly. If you'd loved me, you wouldn't have done any of this. What you loved was the security I provided, the respectability, the cover story that let you live your double life without consequences. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you kissed me and meant it? When was the last time you looked at me and felt actual desire instead of just going through the motions? When was the last time you chose me over him? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again, because we both knew the truth. She'd stopped choosing me years ago, maybe decades ago. I'd just been too blind to see it. After she left to pack, I sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the detritus of a wedding that would never happen. The silence was profound, almost oppressive. For the first time in 22 years, I was truly alone in my own house. And for the first time in 22 years, that felt like a relief. The Hampton Inn on Route 9 was the kind of place that catered to traveling salesmen and families on tight budgets. The parking lot was half empty, the landscaping was minimal, and the lobby smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and stale coffee. It was exactly the kind of place where you'd meet someone to exchange evidence of a decades-long affair. Room 247 was on the second floor, overlooking the highway. I knocked twice and waited, my stomach tight with anticipation. I'd spent the last hour driving around town, trying to process everything I'd learned from the flash drive, trying to prepare myself for whatever new revelations Leora Ventral might have. The door opened, and I got my first look at the woman whose husband had been sleeping with my wife for 24 years. Leora was in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and intelligent brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, and she looked like someone's favorite librarian or high school English teacher. She didn't look like the wife of a man who'd carried on a decades-long affair. But then again, I probably didn't look like the husband of a woman who'd been lying to me for half my adult life. "Mr. Solen," she said, extending her hand, "thank you for coming. I know this must be incredibly difficult for you." "Please call me Grant," I said, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "And thank you for reaching out. I think I need to hear whatever you have to tell me." She invited me in and gestured to one of the room's 2 chairs. The space was small but tidy, with a laptop open on the desk and several manila folders stacked beside it. A small digital recorder sat next to the folders, its red light blinking steadily. "I hope you don't mind," she said, noticing me looking at the recorder. "I've been documenting everything since I found out about the affair." My lawyer suggested it might be useful if there are any legal complications. Legal complications? The money, primarily. Nearly $400,000 transferred from your accounts to my husband's business over the years. Money that I never knew about. Money that wasn't disclosed in any of our financial planning. She sat down across from me, her expression serious. I want you to know that I intend to pay back every penny. It may take time, but I'll find a way. I was taken aback. You don't have to do that. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? She smiled sadly. I was married to Holden for 38 years, Grant. If I'd been paying attention, if I'd been a better wife, maybe none of this would have happened. That's not how affairs work, I said. Trust me, I've been blaming myself for the last 12 hours, wondering what I did wrong, what I missed, how I could have prevented this. But the truth is, people who want to cheat will find a way to cheat. It's not about the spouse they're betraying. You sound like you speak from experience. Professional experience. I investigate insurance fraud for a living. A lot of that involves catching people who are lying about their circumstances, their relationships, their finances. I've seen every kind of deception imaginable. I paused. Except in my own home. Leora nodded sympathetically. Your daughter mentioned that you're an investigator. She said you taught her everything she knows about building a case. She's been thorough. She's been brilliant and ruthless. I have to admit, I'm a little afraid of her. Leora reached for one of the manila folders. But she's also been kind to me. She could have used this information to hurt me as much as your wife, but instead, she helped me understand what really happened to my marriage. She opened the folder and pulled out a stack of letters tied with a blue ribbon. These were in Holden's safe deposit box. I found them when I was settling his estate. Love letters from your wife going back 23 years. 23 years. Almost the entire length of my marriage. I took the letters with numb fingers, untying the ribbon and unfolding the first one. The handwriting was unmistakably Mira's, the same elegant script I'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists for over 2 decades. My dearest Holden, I can't stop thinking about yesterday afternoon. When you kissed me in your office, I felt more alive than I have in years. I know this is complicated. I know we're both married, but I can't pretend I don't feel this connection between us. Grant is a good man, but he's so focused on his work, so distant sometimes. With you, I feel seen. I feel desired. I feel like the woman I used to be before I became just a wife and mother. I don't know where this leads, but I know I want to find out. All my love, M. The letter was dated June 15th, 2001, 2 years after Nora was born, 2 years after Mira had supposedly ended her affair and returned to being a faithful wife. Another lie. I read through several more letters, watching the evolution of their relationship through Mira's words, the initial excitement and guilt giving way to comfortable routine, discussions of weekend getaways and future plans, complaints about their respective spouses, promises of a life together someday when the time was right. One letter from 2018 made my stomach turn. Holden, Grant's been talking about early retirement lately. He wants to travel, maybe buy a cabin in Vermont. He has no idea that I've been planning my own retirement, from this marriage, from this life that feels more like a prison every day. I've been thinking about what you said, about making a clean break. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time to stop pretending and start living honestly. Nora will be graduating college soon, and then there won't be any reason to keep up this charade. I love you. I've loved you for 17 years, and I'm tired of hiding it. Forever yours, M. She was planning to leave me, I said, looking up at Leora. For years, apparently. But she wanted to wait until after Nora's wedding. Something about not wanting to disrupt your daughter's special day. Leora's voice was bitter, as if destroying 2 marriages wouldn't disrupt it anyway. I set the letters aside, feeling sick. What else do you have? She pulled out another folder, this one containing bank statements and financial records. This is where it gets really ugly. The money transfers, the loans that were never repaid, the business investments that were really just gifts. I studied the documents, recognizing some of the transactions from my own records. But seeing them from Holden's side made the scope of the deception even clearer. He'd been treating my money like his own personal slush fund, using it to prop up his failing business while hiding the source from his own wife. "Did you know his business was in trouble?" I asked. I knew things were tight, but Holden always handled the finances. He told me we were fine, that the construction business had its ups and downs, but we'd weather it. She laughed bitterly. I found out after he passed away that we were 3 months away from losing the house. The only thing that kept us afloat was the money your wife was funneling to him. My money. Your money. Money that should have been securing your retirement, your daughter's future, your financial stability. Instead, it was keeping my husband's business alive so he could continue his affair with your wife. The hotel room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the highway where cars rushed past in both directions. People going about their normal lives, unaware that mine had been completely upended. "There's more," Leora said quietly. "The recordings." I turned back to face her. "Nora mentioned those. What kind of recordings?" "Phone conversations between Holden and your wife. He started making them about 2 years ago, when his business was really struggling and he was asking her for larger amounts of money. He was afraid she might back out of their arrangement, so he wanted proof of her promises." She picked up the digital recorder and scrolled through the files. There are dozens of them, hours of conversations about money, about their future plans, about you and me and how to handle the divorces they were planning. "Can I hear them? Are you sure? Some of this is very personal, very hurtful." I sat back down, steeling myself. "I need to know everything." She pressed play on the first file. The sound quality was poor, obviously recorded through a phone, but the voices were clear enough. Mira's voice, warm and intimate, talking to another man the way she used to talk to me in the early days of our marriage. "I transferred another 20,000 today. Grant thinks it's for the new roof, but I told the contractor to inflate the estimate so we'd have extra." Holden's voice, deeper and rougher than I remembered. "You're amazing, baby. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out. After Nora's wedding, we'll have all the time in the world. Just you and me, finally." "What about Grant? You think he'll make trouble in the divorce?" "Grant's too proud to fight dirty. He'll want it over quickly and quietly. We'll get our 50% and disappear." I closed my eyes, listening to my wife plan my financial ruin with her lover. The casual way she discussed stealing from me, the dismissive way she talked about my character, the confident way she assumed I'd just roll over and let her destroy me. She was wrong about that last part. Leora fast-forwarded to another recording, this one more recent. "I'm scared, Holden. What if he finds out about the money? What if he hires a lawyer who actually looks at our finances? He won't. Grant's too trusting, too focused on other people's problems to notice his own. Besides, even if he does find out, what's he going to do? Report his own wife for theft? He'd be too embarrassed." "But what about Nora? She's been asking questions about her birth certificate, about the fertility treatments. What if she figures out you're her father?" "Then we'll deal with it. Maybe it's time for the truth anyway. She's an adult now. She can handle it. I don't want to lose her, Holden. She's the only good thing that came out of my marriage to Grant. The only good thing. 22 years of marriage, reduced to that single phrase." Leora stopped the recording and looked at me with sympathetic eyes. "I'm sorry. I know this is painful to hear." "It's necessary," I said, my voice hoarse. "How many more are there?" 47 files total. The last one was recorded 3 days before Holden's heart attack. She hesitated. That one might be the hardest to hear. They were making final plans. For what? For leaving us. Both of us. They'd found a house in South Carolina near the coast. Holden was going to fake a business trip, clean out what was left of his accounts, and meet your wife there after Nora's wedding. They were going to start over with new identities. New identities. They'd been planning to disappear completely, leaving Leora and me to deal with the wreckage of their deceptions. If Holden hadn't died, I might never have known what happened to them. I would have come home from Nora's wedding to find Mira gone, half our assets missing, and no explanation except maybe a note saying she needed space to find herself. "Play the last recording," I said. Leora looked uncertain. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." She scrolled to the final file and pressed play. The sound quality was better on this one. Holden had apparently upgraded his equipment. "Everything's set for next month," Holden's voice said. "I've got the cashier's checks ready, the new bank accounts opened, the rental house secured. All we need is for Nora's wedding to happen, and then we're free." "I can't wait," Mira replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. 24 years of sneaking around, of pretending to be happy with a man who bores me to tears. Finally, we can be together openly. What about Grant? Any chance he'll make trouble? Grant? Please. He'll probably feel relieved. He's been operating on autopilot for years, just like I have. This marriage has been empty for a decade. We've just been pretending it still exists. And Nora? She'll understand eventually. She's smart enough to see that her parents weren't happy together. Besides, she'll have Cole to focus on, her own life to build. Speaking of Cole, you sure he's good enough for her? He's young and handsome and he adores her. That's enough for now. She can always trade up later if she wants to. They laughed together, two people planning to abandon their families without a second thought. The casual cruelty of it, the complete lack of concern for the people they were leaving behind, was breathtaking. The recording continued for another few minutes, but I'd heard enough. I gestured for Leora to stop it. "That was 3 days before he passed away?" I asked. 3 days. He had the heart attack in his office going over the final details of their escape plan. Leora's voice was steady, but I could see tears in her eyes. "The paramedics found the cashier's checks in his desk drawer. $80,000 cleaned out from our retirement accounts." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "I know this has been hell for you too." "In some ways, I think it's been easier for me. At least my husband is gone. I can mourn him and hate him and eventually move on. You have to live with the knowledge that your wife is still out there, still lying, still planning to betray you." She was right. Mira was upstairs in our house right now, probably packing her things and planning her next move. Maybe she was already calling Cole, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of her plans. Maybe she was calling her sister Vera, looking for sympathy and support. Or maybe she was calling a lawyer, trying to figure out how to minimize the damage to her reputation and her finances. "What are you going to do?" Leora asked. "I'm going to destroy her," I said, the words coming out colder than I'd intended. "Completely, publicly, permanently." "And Cole?" "Him too, and anyone else who helped them or covered for them." I stood up, feeling a sense of purpose for the first time since this nightmare began. They wanted to humiliate me, to steal from me, to abandon me without a second thought. Now they're going to find out what happens when you underestimate someone. Leora smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. "Your daughter said you'd say something like that. She said you were the most dangerous man she knew when someone crossed you." "Nora said that?" "She also said you taught her that the best revenge is the kind that looks like justice." I thought about that as I gathered up the letters and documents Leora had shown me. The best revenge is the kind that looks like justice. It was something I'd told Nora years ago when she was dealing with a bully at school. I'd explained that the most effective way to deal with someone who hurt you wasn't to hurt them back, but to expose their behavior and let the natural consequences follow. I'd never imagined she'd apply that lesson to her own family. "Are you coming to the rehearsal dinner tonight?" I asked. "I wasn't planning to. It seems inappropriate, given the circumstances. Actually, I think you should come. I think it would be very appropriate for you to be there when the truth comes out. Leora studied my face, seeing something there that made her nod slowly. What time should I arrive? 7 o'clock, the country club on Maple Street. And Leora, bring the recordings, all of them. I left the hotel with a folder full of evidence and a plan forming in my mind. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be a celebration of Nora and Cole's upcoming marriage, a chance for both families to come together and toast the happy couple. Instead, it was going to be a reckoning. I drove home through the late afternoon sunshine, past the familiar landmarks of the town where I'd lived for over 20 years, the high school where Nora had graduated valedictorian, the park where we'd had countless family picnics, the church where Mira and I had been married, where Nora was supposed to be married in 2 days. All of it felt different now, tainted by the knowledge of what had been happening behind the scenes. How many of those family picnics had been interrupted by secret phone calls from Holden? How many times had Mira sat in that church, listening to sermons about fidelity and honesty while planning her next rendezvous with her lover? When I got home, Mira's car was gone. I found a note on the kitchen counter, written in her familiar handwriting. Grant, I've gone to stay with Vera for a few days while we figure this out. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But please don't do anything rash. Think about Nora, about our families, about all the people who will be hurt if this becomes public. We can work through this privately. We can go to counseling. We can rebuild trust. We can find a way forward together. But only if we handle this maturely, without letting our emotions drive us to do things we'll regret. I love you. I've always loved you. Please remember that. Mira. I read the note twice, then crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. Even now, even after everything I'd learned, she was still trying to manipulate me, still trying to control the narrative, to manage the situation, to minimize the consequences of her actions. She was worried about people getting hurt if this became public. But she hadn't worried about hurting me when she was stealing my money. She hadn't worried about hurting Nora when she was sleeping with her fiancé. She hadn't worried about hurting Leora when she was planning to run away with Holden. Now it was her turn to worry. I called Nora. Your mother's gone to Vera's. I know. She called me, crying and begging me to talk you out of doing anything rash tonight. What did you tell her? I told her I'd think about it. I want her to feel safe right up until the moment we destroy her. Are you sure about this, Nora? Once we do this, there's no going back. Your relationship with your mother will never recover. Dad, my relationship with my mother ended the moment I found out she'd been lying to me my entire life. Everything since then has just been me gathering evidence and planning my response. And Cole? Cole's been texting me all day, begging for forgiveness. He thinks he can charm his way out of this. He has no idea what's coming. I looked around the kitchen, at the wedding favors still scattered across the table, at the refrigerator covered with photos of our family over the years. All of it felt like evidence of a crime now, props in an elaborate deception that had lasted longer than some people's entire marriages. What time should I pick you up for dinner? I asked. I'm already getting ready. I want to look perfect tonight. I want everyone to remember how beautiful and composed I looked when I destroyed their lives. After I hung up, I went upstairs to get ready myself. I chose my best suit, the charcoal gray one I wore to important business meetings. I wanted to look professional, authoritative, like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Because for the first time in 24 hours, I did know exactly what I was doing. I was going to a rehearsal dinner where I would expose 24 years of lies and betrayal in front of 50 people who thought they were celebrating a wedding. And I was going to enjoy every minute of it. The Maple Street Country Club looked exactly like what it was, old money clinging to tradition in a world that had already moved forward. The building dated back to the 1920s, filled with dark wood and polished brass, with oil portraits of long-gone members lining the hallways. It was the kind of place where 3 generations of the same family hosted wedding receptions, where business was settled over golf and alliances were quietly shaped over cocktails. It was perfect for what I had planned. I arrived at 6:30, 30 minutes before the official start time, carrying a leather portfolio that contained copies of every piece of evidence Nora and Leora had gathered: bank records, love letters, audio transcripts, photographs, email printouts. Everything needed to tell the complete story of my wife's 24-year deception. The private dining room was already set up for 50 guests, with round tables covered in white linen and centerpieces of white roses. A small stage had been set up at one end of the room for toasts and speeches. The bar was open, and a few early arrivals were already mingling with drinks in hand. I recognized most of the faces: Mira's parents, Harold and Elizabeth, who'd flown in from Chicago and were holding court near the windows; my brother Tom and his wife Janet, who lived in Boston and rarely made it up for family events; Cole's parents and siblings, a boisterous group that dominated one corner of the room; various aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends, all dressed in their best clothes and ready to celebrate. None of them knew they were about to witness the destruction of 2 families. Cole was near the bar, looking nervous and drinking what appeared to be his 2nd or 3rd scotch. He was dressed in an expensive suit and had clearly spent extra time on his hair and appearance, but he couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders or the way his eyes kept darting to the entrance every time someone new arrived. He was waiting for Nora, probably hoping to get a few minutes alone with her before the evening officially began. He had no idea that Nora had been planning this moment for months. "Grant!" Harold, Mira's father, approached with a broad smile and an outstretched hand. "There's the father of the bride. How are you holding up? Getting nervous about tomorrow?" "Actually, Harold, there's been a change of plans," I said, shaking his hand. "We need to talk about the wedding." His smile faltered slightly. "What kind of change?" "The kind that affects everyone here, but let's wait until everyone arrives before we get into details." Harold looked confused but nodded. "Where's Mira? I haven't seen her yet." "She's dealing with a family emergency," I said, which was technically true. "She'll be here soon." That was a lie, but Harold didn't need to know that yet. More guests arrived over the next few minutes. The room filled with conversation and laughter, the sound of people who had no idea their evening was about to take a dramatic turn. I worked my way through the crowd, making small talk and accepting congratulations on Nora's upcoming marriage, all while keeping one eye on the entrance. At 7 o'clock sharp, Nora arrived. She looked absolutely stunning. She was wearing a midnight blue dress that hugged her figure perfectly, with her hair styled in an elegant updo and jewelry that caught the light when she moved. She looked like a bride-to-be, radiant and happy, and ready to celebrate her future. She also looked like a woman who was about to commit murder and enjoy every second of it. Cole immediately moved toward her, his face lighting up with relief. "Nora, baby, you look incredible. I've been trying to reach you all day." "Have you?" Nora's voice was perfectly pleasant, but there was something underneath it that made Cole stop mid-sentence. "I've been busy. Wedding preparations, you know how it is." "Right, of course. Listen, can we talk? Privately? There are some things we need to discuss before—" "Before what, Cole? Before we get married tomorrow?" Nora smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Don't worry. We'll have plenty of time to talk tonight. In front of everyone." Cole's face went pale. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this is a rehearsal dinner, isn't it? We're supposed to practice for tomorrow. Practice our vows, practice our speeches, practice telling everyone how much we love each other." She moved closer to him, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "I've been practicing my speech for months, Cole. I think you're really going to enjoy it." Before Cole could respond, the door opened again and Leora Ventral walked in. I'd suggested she dress for the occasion, and she'd taken my advice seriously. She was wearing a black dress and pearls, looking every inch the respectable widow. She also carried a small purse that I knew contained a digital recorder and several key pieces of evidence. Cole didn't recognize her, but I saw several other guests glance in her direction with curiosity. She wasn't supposed to be here. The guest list had been carefully curated months ago, but she carried herself with enough confidence that most people assumed she belonged. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, raising my voice to get the room's attention, "if I could have everyone take their seats, we'd like to get started." The guests moved to their assigned tables, conversations slowly fading as people settled into their chairs. Cole and Nora sat at the head table with the immediate family. I stepped up to the podium on the small stage, looking out at 50 faces that were about to witness something unforgettable. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice carrying easily through the room. "As most of you know, tomorrow was supposed to be a very special day for our family. Nora and Cole were planning to exchange vows and begin their life together as husband and wife." I paused, letting the past tense sink in. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. However, there have been some recent developments that have changed those plans. Significantly. Harold leaned forward in his chair. "Grant, what's going on? Where's Mira?" "Mira is currently staying with her sister Vera, dealing with the consequences of some very poor choices she's made over the past 24 years. I opened my portfolio and pulled out the first document. Choices that have affected not just our marriage, but our family, our finances, and the lives of everyone in this room. The silence was absolute now. 50 people staring at me, waiting for an explanation that would make sense of what they were hearing. 3 days ago, I discovered that my wife has been having an affair," I continued. "Not a recent affair, not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a systematic, decades-long deception that has defined our entire marriage." Gasps echoed through the room. Harold's face went white. Elizabeth grabbed her husband's arm. Tom leaned forward in his chair, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. The relationship started in 2000, not long after Nora was born. It went on for 24 years and ended 8 months ago when the other man was no longer around. I met Cole's eyes as he froze, fear written plainly on his face. And it seems loss drives people to reckless choices. Because 3 months ago, Mira began another secret relationship, this time with our daughter's fiancé. The room erupted. Voices raised in shock and disbelief, chairs scraping against the floor as people turned to stare at Cole and Nora. Cole's face had gone from pale to green, and he looked like he might be sick. Nora, by contrast, looked completely calm. She was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, watching the chaos with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment. "That's impossible," Harold said, standing up. "Grant, I don't know what you think you saw, but Mira would never—" "Mira would never what, Harold? Lie? Cheat? Steal?" I pulled out a stack of bank records and held them up. "Because she's done all three extensively for over 2 decades. I began reading from the financial documents, detailing the transfers, the amounts, the fake explanations. $380,000 stolen from our joint accounts and funneled to her lover's failing business. Years of lies about home improvements and investments and emergency loans." "This is insane," Elizabeth said, her voice shaking. "Grant, you're having some kind of breakdown. Mira loves you. She's devoted to you and Nora." "Is she?" I looked at Leora, who stood up from her table in the back of the room. "Mrs. Ventral, would you please tell everyone how devoted Mira has been to our family?" Leora stepped to the front of the room with calm, deliberate strides, her expression steady while her eyes held clear intent. "My name is Leora Ventral," she said, her voice resonating through the quiet space. "I was married to Holden Ravel for 38 years until 8 months ago, when he was no longer here. I've come tonight because I'm holding something that belongs to this family." She reached into her purse and pulled out the stack of love letters tied with blue ribbon. "These are letters from Mira Solen to my husband, spanning 23 years. letters detailing their affair, their plans to leave their spouses, and their dreams of a life together. She untied the ribbon and began reading from the top letter, Mira's words about feeling alive and desired and seen. The room was so quiet, I could hear the air conditioning humming in the background. There are 47 letters in total, Leora continued, along with audio recordings of phone conversations, financial records showing money transfers, and hotel receipts documenting their meetings over more than 2 decades. Cole suddenly stood up, his chair falling backward with a crash. This is crazy. I don't know what kind of sick joke this is, but I'm not staying here to listen to it. Sit down, Cole, Nora said quietly. Nora, baby, you can't believe this. Your father's obviously having some kind of mental breakdown. Sit down, Nora repeated, and this time there was steel in her voice. We're not finished yet. Cole remained standing, looking around the room desperately. This is all lies. Someone's trying to sabotage our wedding, trying to break us up. Cole, I said, pulling out my phone, would you like me to play the security footage from the Sleepy Inn on Route 9? The footage showing you and my wife checking into room 237 on 17 different occasions over the past 3 months? Cole's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He sat down heavily, his face buried in his hands. Or perhaps, Nora said, standing up for the first time, everyone would like to hear about the other women. The room, which had been buzzing with shocked whispers, went silent again. Other women? Cole's mother asked, her voice barely a whisper. Oh yes, Nora said, her voice bright and cheerful, as if she were discussing the weather. Cole's been very busy these past few months. There's Jennifer from his office, Rebecca from the gym, and Sarah from the coffee shop downtown. I have photos, text messages, hotel receipts. Cole's been quite the busy bee. She pulled out her phone and began swiping through photos, holding up the screen so the room could see. Images of Cole with various women, clearly taken by a private investigator, clearly showing intimate encounters. The thing about cheaters, Nora continued conversationally, is that they rarely stop at just one affair. It becomes a pattern, a compulsion. Cole wasn't just cheating on me with my stepmother, he was cheating on both of us with half the women in town. Cole's father stood up abruptly. That's enough. Cole, we're leaving, now. Actually, I said, I don't think Cole should leave just yet, because there's one more thing everyone needs to know. I looked directly at Cole, who was now visibly shaking. Tell them about the gambling debts, Cole. Tell them about the money you owe to some very unpleasant people in Boston. Tell them about why you were so eager to marry into a family with money. Cole's face crumpled. How do I know? Because I'm a professional investigator, Cole. And once I started looking into your background, I found some very interesting information. $75,000 in gambling debts. Threats from loan sharks. A business that's 3 months behind on rent. I pulled out another set of documents. You weren't marrying my daughter for love, Cole. You were marrying her for access to our family's money. Money that you planned to steal, just like my wife has been stealing it for 24 years. The room was in complete chaos now. People were standing, arguing, demanding explanations. Cole's family was trying to get him to leave. Harold was demanding to speak to Mira immediately. Elizabeth was crying into her napkin. In the middle of it all, Nora stood calmly at the head table, watching her life implode with the satisfaction of someone who had orchestrated every moment of the destruction. There's one more thing, she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Something that affects me personally. The room quieted again, everyone turning to look at the bride who would never be. I am not Grant Solen's biological daughter, she said simply. My real father was Holden Revell, my mother's lover of 24 years. The fertility treatments my parents supposedly underwent were a complete fiction. My entire life has been built on a lie. Harold sat down heavily, his face gray. Elizabeth was openly sobbing now. Tom was staring at me with an expression of complete shock. But here's the thing, Nora continued, walking around the table to stand beside me. Grant Solen may not be my biological father, but he's the man who raised me. He's the man who taught me right from wrong, who showed me how to investigate and build a case, who demonstrated what integrity and honesty look like. She put her hand on my shoulder, and he's the man who taught me that the best revenge is the kind that looks like justice. The room was silent, except for the sound of Elizabeth's crying and the distant noise of traffic outside. 50 people sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. The wedding is canceled, I announced. Obviously, Cole will be returning all gifts and deposits. Mira will be filing for divorce and moving out of our family home. And everyone in this room will go home tonight with a very clear understanding of what happens when you betray the people who love you. I closed my portfolio and stepped down from the stage. Thank you all for coming. I hope you found this evening educational. As I walked toward the door, the room erupted again, voices raised in anger, confusion, and disbelief. Cole's family was arguing among themselves. Harold was demanding answers that no one could give him. Various relatives were taking sides, choosing teams, preparing for the family civil war that would inevitably follow. But I didn't stop to listen. I'd said everything I needed to say. I'd exposed every lie, revealed every deception, destroyed every reputation that deserved to be destroyed. Nora followed me out of the dining room, her heels clicking on the marble floor of the country club's lobby. We walked outside into the cool October evening, leaving behind the chaos we'd created. "How do you feel?" she asked as we reached my car. I thought about it for a moment. 24 hours ago, I'd been a married man looking forward to my daughter's wedding. Now I was a man whose life had been completely upended, whose marriage was over, whose family was destroyed. But for the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt completely honest. No more lies, no more deceptions, no more pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. "I feel free," I said finally. Nora smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her since this nightmare began. "Good, because tomorrow we start building something new, something honest." As we drove away from the country club, I could see people streaming out of the building behind us. The rehearsal dinner was over, but the real drama was just beginning. There would be phone calls and confrontations, lawyers and financial settlements, family members choosing sides and relationships ending. It would be messy and painful and probably take years to fully resolve. But it would also be honest. And after 24 years of living a lie, honesty felt like the most precious gift I could give myself. The wedding was off. The truth was out. And for the first time in my adult life, I knew exactly who I was and what I stood for. It was enough.